Thanks for joining us on another episode of Tea and Trowels. I'm Emma, and today we're joined with Dr. Ed Jolie. Would you like to introduce yourself and your mug?
Sure. My name is Ed Jolie. I'm a archaeology faculty member here at Mercyhurst University in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I am with my mug. I don't know how well it's going to show up. Do you watch Dairy Girls?
I do.
So this was a gift at Christmas from my sister-in-law, and it's a mug with the blackboard emblazoned with the differences between Protestants and Catholics. And my sister-in-law knows how much I love and appreciate the humor of Dairy Girls, and so that's one of my favorite scenes. So she got me a mug emblazoned with the differences category, which seems appropriate for an anthropologist emphasizing human diversity to have a mug that talks about differences.
That's awesome. I absolutely love Dairy Girls. I am running out of mugs, so I just went with what I describe as my grandma mug collection, which is just those tea mugs that have random, like, beautiful artwork of nature. But I guess for the archaeologists, it's a nice thing of bone china that has survived moves from Erie to Pensacola and now to Orlando. So it's made its way through. But we'll quick get started. How did you get into archaeology?
So I think really I always enjoyed being outside. I like poking around the woods, and probably about the age of 10, I started volunteering at a local nature center in Maryland where I grew up. And I thought, this is really cool. Maybe I'll get into forestry or something like that. But I think probably by the time I was 11 or so, the small private school I went to in Maryland had an opportunity to go participate in some laboratory work at, it's Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum in Southern Maryland, which is, at the time, they had not yet built the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Laboratory, which is the big state repository for Maryland archaeological collections. And it was really close to my house, and so I took up that opportunity to go visit and got engaged in their public archaeology program with Dr. Stu Reeves was running the project at the time, and Dr. Jolie King was directing the MAC lab, and really her and Ed Cheney, who were working in the lab, were the ones that not only sort of took me under their wings, but kept me engaged. And so I started volunteering probably about the age of 11. And by the age of 15, when they could pay me, they would hand out paychecks every couple of weeks to everybody on the crews that I would volunteer on as a field tech. And I got the biggest paycheck that anybody got. I had 6 figures, but they just happened to be all zeros. But when they started paying me, about when I was 15, I was then able to go out on projects, and I was hooked by that point. I realized that this is not only a cool thing that gets me outside, but I get to learn about the past. And being Indian, so much of the Native American archaeology this is family history. So it's the best of both worlds from my perspective. So I've stuck with it ever since.
That's awesome. It's awesome that the fact that you got paid at 15 to do archaeology. That's
yeah. I will tell you. The crews that I worked on. It was a very educational experience, and in all the best ways. But I appreciate now how good I had it to be living at home at 15. I have a great job in the summer that I enjoyed. It was a lot of work, but a great learning experience. And $8 an hour at 15, living at home, pretty nice. I will tell you, pretty nice.
Yeah, that's some cush job right there.
Right.
So what is your current research?
So primarily I focus in perishable artifacts. So there are people that study ceramics and stone tools and things like that. And I focus on organic artifacts. So artifacts don't typically survive in a lot of archaeological contexts. So textiles, baskets, sandals, string, all that sort of thing. And so I run and manage a lab here where people send us material from, could be from all over the planet. We have collections from, South America, from Peru in the lab right now, from Mexico, and all throughout the United States, where organic artifacts have turned up. And there aren't many of us that work with this material. So frequently they get sent to me, and I love it. It's great. I get to sort of dabble in lots of different things. And I really like archaeology. I mean, I'm not I have areas and time periods of interest, but I've always just enjoyed what I learn about the past. And so I did a lot of historic archaeology in Maryland through Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. And then as I came up here to Mercyhurst as an undergraduate, I got into more the pre-contact archaeology, and obviously going to graduate school out west was good for that. And yeah, I just like archaeology. There's interesting archaeology and interesting questions everywhere. And so right now the research, there's always a stream of projects coming through the lab, but some of the more current projects have to do with a collaborative project that we're engaged in with the Seneca Nation of Indians out of Salamanca, New York, on a French and Indian War era period site called Custeloga Town, which is about an hour south of us here in Erie. And it was a site that was largely occupied from like 1754 to about 1764, the French and Indian War. And it was predominantly a Delaware and Seneca village. And it's also the final resting place of Guy Suta, who's a famous Seneca diplomat and war leader. He was very prominent in Pontiac's rebellion and actually knew George Washington. And so there was interest in archaeological research and preservation initiatives that came out of the Seneca Nation, and that was what drove the work there. Because I mean, it's not that I objected to doing or returning to historical archaeology in any way, but you know, it's quite far removed from anything I've been doing recently. So I benefited from having had that experience now years ago in historic archaeology to come back to this. But it's been pretty awesome. We have uncovered some really interesting things, and it's great to engage with the historical record in a way that I hadn't as a field tech working on historic projects. So I've been getting a lot of enjoyment out, and you know, like all these things, they snowball and lead to other projects. I do a lot of work with baskets and textiles, obviously. So it's been a good excuse to interact with some more of the Seneca weavers and talk with them.
That's awesome. I might have to, what I joke around is doing an archaeology vacation where field schools happen, and when I just want to go and beg someone to let me put a trowel on the ground somewhere cool.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys' next field school, I'll have to see about making a trip up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of going with the fieldwork theme, what is your favorite tool in your toolkit?
I thought a lot about this, and a trowel is indispensable. A good sharp trowel, you can't go wrong with. But I'm also a big fan that, you know, you need to have the right tool for the job. So it sounds, or maybe seems kind of silly, but I would say, I mean, this is your best tool out in the field. And I mean that not in terms of, you know, knowledge or facts that people acquire, but, you know, cultivating attention to detail. Like, it's always something that I think we can work on and benefits us in the field in ways that we don't even appreciate. And then also that, you know, cultivating a sense of curiosity. I'm always interested in learning something. I'm always trying to think about what is it that I'm seeing or doing that I maybe can do better. Maybe there's something that I've never looked into that I need to. And I've learned a lot, you know, in this project at Custeloga Town that will serve me well no matter where I go. So I feel like that openness and attentiveness to detail and constantly learning is probably the biggest asset from our evolved primate brains.
That is a next level response. That I love it. It's so true. And I mean, a lot of our responses to these questions have gotten a little, you know, little out there, but that's critical to also just be able to, you know, adapt in a situation real fast. I think that is just, you know, our own brain power as humans really is critical for archaeology. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's a healthy appreciation for what you don't know and what you can learn, I think is key. You know, there are some people out there who think they know everything or act that way, but really you're far better off just operating as if you have no idea what you don't know.
Yeah, I feel like every new field experience, you learn something new.
Absolutely.
And then you bring that into the next project and the next project. So agree. I also talk about field stories. What is your best, worst field story? So those stories that happen that you can laugh about now.
Yeah, I have a lot, I think, and some are consequences of sort of my being naive and young, and some of them are just kind of silly. I think the one that always sticks out to me is, I guess I was in high school, so I must have been 16 or 17. And it was before I started college, and we were working at a contact period site in Maryland, in Southern Maryland. And archaeologist who I believe still remains active, Jim Harmon, who's known for, at least he was, more than 20 years ago, unleashing a tirade of rapid fire expletives at the drop of a hat. Not that they would be directed at any person or thing, but he was capable of that sort of string of F-bombs like few I've ever met were capable of. And one day, while we had been brought out to help assist on the project because they were trying to wrap it up, their data collection, and get it backfilled. And so we'd been brought on from our shovel test probe survey to help them backfill and finish the screen, just sort of wrap things up quickly as possible. And it was on, I don't want to give away too many names, it was in Southern Maryland on at the time they had a lot of contracts with the naval air stations and the Navy. And so it was on a naval base that specialized in weapons research. And all of a sudden I heard Jim utter out this, characteristic string of expletives. And then it was punctuated with, "They're not supposed to be doing that while we're out here." And I'm looking up from the screen or backfilling or whatever I was doing. And we're all sort of like, what's going on? And he says, "Well, they're not supposed to be doing that while we're out here." And so we look over, and the site was sort of in between what looked like two narrow asphalt paved pathways, but they had like golf carts, like truck style golf carts that they were carting things on. And beyond that, there was an access road that was paved, and there was a full legit sized truck there. And it had a big tank. It looked almost to me like a keg of beer, like a large keg of beer sitting on the back. And there was a guy driving with a yellow blinking light on top, sitting in the front cab. And then there was a man sitting with an arm on top of the keg with the tailgate down. And I thought, what are they doing? And they were transporting nitroglycerin in the back of an open bed truck. They were going slow, but as it turns out, and I learned, the site that we were working on had actually been discovered in the 1950s when nitroglycerin exploded and literally leveled the entire landscape where the base was located. And so they saw all these artifacts turning up and said, "Hey, there's a site here." So the site was recorded because of an earlier accident. And then also put in perspective why in between a lot of the access roads and paved pathways, there were these conical pits dug deep down the ground, at which there was, it looked like a concrete phone booth. And in the phone booth is where they'd store the nitroglycerin and other chemicals. Because what happens if it was an accident exploded, the concrete cone would force it up and out rather than sideways, horizontally to level it. So that was why I realized that, it was lucky that I hadn't been working on that project. I don't know if they were getting hazard pay. I don't know what exactly that situation was like, but they weren't allowed to have lighters or radios. And I heard after the fact that it was quite a fight to get them to be allowed to use shovels, lest they spark striking a rock.
Surprisingly enough, that's not the first story I've heard about unexploded ordnance or military testing, or the military forgetting that the archaeologists are out in the field, especially being from Panhandle of Florida, Eglin Air Force Base, and all of the other like EOD testing schools and facilities had a few stories of people hearing the sirens while they're out in the middle of a shovel test, and they have to book it out of the range.
Yeah, yeah, it's scary. I remember seeing this was in some of the very early days of the stealth bomber, and so we'd at the end of the month sometimes see them doing touch and go landings to get in sort of flight hours, things like that. But yeah, it's pretty wild stuff.
And I mean, they're prime spots to find those archaeological sites. They're
right
of untouched, undeveloped land.
Yeah.
So continuing on to our next question, it's our kind of bigger one. It's, how do you think that archaeology can help save the world?
Well, at the risk of getting to obscure on you again, I think any answer to a question like that requires that we be thinking in terms of lots of different solutions or ways to solve problems. And I think that anthropology is really good at coming up with creative ways to solve problems, but also that if you think about how many of the problems that we face today as a species, as people, how many of them can be reduced down on some level to discord owing to cultural or religious or ethnic or racial conflicts. You know, anthropological study and investment in human diversity as a topic stands to contribute a lot to how we interact and engage with one another today. And obviously we all have to live here on the planet. We all have to get along. And so we need to be able to talk to each other. We need to be able to talk about each other's past, understand each other's past. And if we're going to go make any progress towards resolving some of these common problems that we face as a species, then we have to work together. So I think on a massive macro scale, that's how anthropology can help save the world. Archaeology has its role to play, not just because we get a sort of a unique perspective on the past, but we're getting at a point where we should be able to and can acquire better examples or case studies of cooperation and conflict in the past, things that bear on and are relevant to contemporary problems and social issues. And so in that vein, I also see that from a personal standpoint, there's a lot to archaeology that provides a means of, I think of as restorative social justice. That, you know, when I first started learning about some of the things that archaeology could do, it became, as it does for many other Indian people, a tool that can be used and wielded for great benefit, as much as harm, but also benefit in that it provides an opportunity to reclaim traditions and knowledge that have been lost or which lie dormant. And that, I think, for me has been, I think that's what convinced me that this was worth doing, because I think a lot of people, no matter their field, struggle with a point in their life in which they think, is this really worth it? Am I doing any good? And I think, you know, everybody has to sort of come to terms themselves with those projects and careers they engage in. And that for me was it. Once I sort of had that realization that this is something that could be put to work to help people and help other Indian people, then I thought, this is it. So we can do good with it.
Agreed, 100%. I also think, just especially with my education from Mercyhurst, I think it allows us to ask the right questions. Like, we get taught how to really get to the root of a problem, whether it's in an archaeological context, an anthropological context, or now just in daily life. You're able to sort through and ask these right, engaging questions.
Yeah. You know, it's staying relevant, I mean, is what it amounts to. Is, you know, we need to respond as a discipline to society's changing wants and needs, and we also need to be a little bit more socially responsible about it. And we're getting there slowly.
Yeah, we're getting there. I think our quarantine has allowed for a lot more discussion and a lot more access to resources, especially just with Zoom conversations or the availability of just virtual learning. Just a college level, but just the amount of tune in tonight series people are doing, I think it's great. Kind of on the same line, our last question, it's our bonus. What is keeping you sane right now?
I think that the opportunity to have some time and headspace, like physically forced to be away from campus and the office and my lab, had its downsides, but I think it not only generated some good family time with my wife and daughter, which is always wonderful, but it sort of altered the way I was approaching some things. And I think that it also created a space for me to want to and have more motivation to carve out more time for myself in terms of ways that might de-stress. So I a couple months ago returned to beading, which I haven't done in years, probably since high school. And my daughter's been taking more of an interest in that, so that's been fun. So I'd say return to some of those crafting things. I've never felt particularly artistic or creative, but there's something very, very Zen-like with it's, quiet and dark outside, and I can put on a a silly TV show or music and kind of do some bead work, or play with plants. I've been collecting a lot more plants that are locally available, working on my botany and processing them for basketry materials. Some of the local weavers, the emerald ash borer is an invasive insect that's been killing large numbers of ash trees up here around the Great Lakes for almost 20 years now. And it's meant that there aren't a lot of plants available for traditional Seneca splint baskets made out of ash. So I've been experimenting with a lot of local plants and finding plants that hopefully other weavers might pick up and use as not just substitutes, but to make sure they're weaving, even if they're not weaving with traditional materials that aren't available, that we keep people weaving.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think everyone has adopted into more crafts and more plants and things, and I kind of love seeing all of that, everyone's COVID projects. So I would definitely like to see some of your projects. That was our last question. So I just want to thank you for coming on to Tea and Trowels, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much. It was good seeing you.